The giants lived on Earth much more recently. 10 years ago, I wrote books on Atlantis, describing the antediluvian world we shared with giants. I showed how mythology around the world spoke of these titans and their clashes with humans, and how thousands of giant skeletons were unearthed in the 18th and 19th century. They were reported in local newspapers of the time. Skeletons were carried away and hidden by government-affiliated archaeological groups. In the US, it was the Smithsonian Institute that was tasked with one of the greatest cover-ups of all time. As tedious of a read as it is, this book, among others, proves the cover-up beyond doubt. In my books, I said that the giants roamed the lands probably more than 12,000 years ago before the Great Flood, and how some of them survived the deluge, with the very last of their species being eliminated a few hundred years ago. About this I was wrong. I had been deceived because hundreds of books on ancient mysteries, such as those by Edgar Cayce, Graham Hancock, Zechariah Sitchin, Robert Bauval, Blavatsky, etc., speak of a time more than 10,000 years ago. Even religious folk place key events to thousands of years ago, and Darwinists say the first intelligent humans appeared 8,000 years ago. Giants are real, but the timelines are wrong. I have since learned events of both conventional history, such as the Egyptian, Greek, and Roman empires, and also events of alternative history, such as the Great Flood ends. Dragons and giants are more recent. As you've read in previous articles, at least 1,000 years have been added to the Middle Ages. That would mean that 1580 is really 580, 1840 is really 840, 1231 is actually 231, and so forth. And that's only the time theft I know of. There could have been several more in prior ages. I won't expound here. If you wish to learn more, look into the phantom time hypothesis. I don't understand the details yet, but there seems to have been a series of cataclysmic events as recent as the 18th and 19th century. The most major reset seems to have happened around 1850. Slaves of giants. There was a time giants enslaved humans, using them for forced labor and even as food. Below is a Mesopotamian engraving of the giant god and goddess Utu and Inanna holding earthlings captive using a nose ring. No doubt one of the less flattering moments in our history. This is similar to more recent illustrations, such as this 17th century Cornish story, Jack the Giant Killer. Here, a giant is seen holding humans as slaves. Mesopotamia is supposed to have been 5,000 years ago and the medieval tales 500 years ago. Just one of many examples of correspondence between very ancient and fairly recent. Human enslavement, is that why we have catastrophic events? Were we waging war against our slave masters? Who eradicated these giants? Why has their presence faded over the last few hundred years? Recent giants? And then there are giants who lived beside smaller humans in peace. The photo engraving below is of the funeral procession of Vicente Guerrero, made in 1833. He was the second president of Mexico. His funeral took place in Quilapam, Oaxaca, Mexico. In attendance are ecclesiastics, civilians, and giants. This is a photo engraving. That means it captures a reality of the time. Giants casually mingle with humans and no big deal is made of it. Close-ups, 18. 33 is recent. Less than 200 years ago, your great-grandmother might have lived alongside giants. Below is a lithograph that was made in 1830. The subtitle says, Steppe Inhabitants of Asian Tartary. The subtitle does not mention the giants, it just calls them and the two smaller humans steppe inhabitants, as if this were entirely normal. Giants were with us in the 1700s and 1800s through several revolutionary wars. Then came World War I. After that, the giants mostly disappeared. If there were any left, they were featured in circus shows. The theme of circus giants continued until World War II. After that, they even disappeared from there. Is it possible that all the revolutionary wars that were happening around the world at the time were a cover for the real war against the giants? These struggles for independence all happened at around the same time, worldwide, as if coordinated. Some researchers have noticed how they shared the same fashion designer, regardless of whether they were in the US, UK, France, or Russia. Image below, Baptiste and Antoine Hugo, late 1880s. They were called the Giants of the Alps and were featured in circus shows. It's interesting to me that 1830s giants were treated as normal parts of everyday life, and 1880s giants were circus attractions. What happened between 1830 and 1880 to create such a profound change in perception? I went searching for the earliest mention of giants as circus performers. I found Anna Swan, 1862. So what happened between 1830 and 1862 to create such a profound change in perception? In 30 years, we went from living alongside giants and calling them inhabitants to enslaving them as circus freaks. The first circus freak shows began in the 1840s, apparently. That's around the same time, according to previous articles, that massive cities sprang up seemingly out of nowhere while others burned to the ground. Some researchers say that it was in the late 1840s that a great reset happened, meaning the old Earth was wiped away and given a fresh start. I never gave that theory much attention, but maybe it's true. The next four are also from the 1800s National Geographic photos from the 1920s. China, 1865, a guy named Jan Sichai. The drawing below is of Irishman Charles Byrne, born in 1761. The skeleton of Byrne is still on display today in the Hunterian Museum in London. A 1756 painting by Nicholas Raguenet. Much more can be found around the internet. You also find thousands of old newspaper articles on the skeletons of giants having been found. This one is from July 13th, 1908, in the Washington Times. An example from 1902. Were all these skeletons unearthed during that time because the war against giants had been recent? Or was this a media campaign to make it look like they were more ancient? It's hard to tell from here. They apparently lost the battle. But why would our governments go to such lengths to mask their reality? Or to conceal that they were defeated? To act like nothing ever happened? To re-script history? If they defeated the giants, wouldn't they want to advertise and commemorate it? The religious scriptures say that the giants are the offspring of forbidden relations between angels and humans. Were they eradicated by the rulers of this realm? Thanks to our fake education system, we know very little about them or the circumstances of their disappearance. We're simply told giants didn't exist because they don't fit the Darwinist narrative. I remember specifically asking this question of a school teacher when I was young. She said, "Those are Bible fairy tales." In school, we learn about real things that can be proven by science. In folk tales, giants are presented as dumb, axe and falx-wielding, nomadic monsters that harass humans. On the other hand, the many large structures could be more easily explained with their help. They are not the works of brainless monsters. In the photos we do have from the old times, they don't seem to differ from smaller humans, except in size. If giants were much more recent, it would explain the gigantic doors we see on so many buildings ascribed to the Middle Ages, the horned giants. According to an article titled "Giant's Bones in Mound" in the New York Times of July 14, 1916, archaeologists dug up the remains of horned giants in the Susquehanna Valley of Pennsylvania. Among the photos circulating at the time was this horned skull. According to the article, a Professor A.B. Skinner of the American Indian Museum and Reverend George Donohue, Pennsylvania state historian, and Professor W.K. Moorhead of the Phillips Andover Academy discovered the burial mound with the remains of 68 people. They had the average height of 7 to 8 feet, 2.4 meters. On July 30th, only a few weeks later, Skinner wrote a retraction of the whole thing again in the New York Times. As so often with cover-ups, several versions of the story began circulating. According to one, the whole thing was a prank. According to another, a disgruntled cook at the camp made the story up. Regardless of the story, they were telling the public that there are no skulls with horns, nor people with horns, nor anything like that. Fact-checkers today continue to insist that no such thing exists or was ever dug up. If there are ever any giants found anywhere, it's because of a disease called gigantism, they tell you. The truth? There are plenty of medieval drawings, paintings, and tales of giants and smaller humans with horns. Consider the above portrait painting is Margaretha van Eyck by Flemish painter Jean van Eyck, 1439. Is it possible that this fashion of the Middle Ages was meant to conceal real horns? Or that these are actual horns rather than a fashion? Are these our infamous reptilians? See Medieval Image by Michael Patcher, 1455 below, disguised as humans. There are still people today that grow horns, but it's so rare that it's labeled cutaneous horn and seen as some kind of disease or tumor.
Dragons are much more recent. This whole ancient thing around dragons and serpents may also be much more recent than I thought. In fact, there is some link between serpents and giants. According to the Book of Enoch, the fallen angels landed on Mount Hermon. There they made a pact to have sex with humans. The offspring of the interactions created the giants.
On the one hand, we have these Mesopotamian and Sumerian images of reptilian beings. On the other hand, we have countless medieval drawings and paintings of reptilian beings interacting with or warring with humans, such as the one below. Notice the horns. Below is an image dated 875 from the British Library in London. It is apparently taken from a French legal codex. Dragons mentioned in law books, not bad for a creature that allegedly didn't exist. The image below is a 1526 painting by Peter Bruegel, a Dutch painter. At first sight, there is nothing unusual about the painting. With a magnifying glass, you see the painter has tucked in some other stuff that has bypassed the censors of history.
Here's that close-up.
People are riding on three animals that look like dinosaurs. An even closer look.
If this were the only example of dragon-like creatures existing alongside humans, we could easily dismiss it. But there are plenty more. We find these because the fakers of history aren't very thorough when it comes to scrubbing evidence. These creatures are not portrayed as the main feature, but as a casual side to the main feature of armed soldiers.
In case you are wondering why I refer to dinosaurs as dragons, here's something I posted on my Telegram channel a few months ago. There is a chapter in the biblical book of Daniel called Bel and the Dragon. It is not very well known because it's been removed from many modern Bibles. When parts of an ancient book are removed to appease modern preferences, it's mostly because it reveals some aspect of hidden history. The story is about people worshipping both Bel, which is an idol or statue, and a dragon. The book says that contrary to Bel, the dragon is a real creature. The story compares the unreal Bel with the real dragon. The dragon is the real problem. Bel is the illusion that the dragon puts in front of people to divert from itself. The hero of the story, Daniel, gets rid of Bel by demonstrating that it is not Bel but humans who are receiving sacrificial offerings, and he gets rid of the dragon by slaying it.
I can see why this story is absent in many modern Bibles. It's a stark reminder of the theme of humans slaying dragons. A story found across all cultures and in many different folk legends around the world. It's a reminder that not so long ago, these things were taken for granted as being real.
Conclusion. I have always skipped the Middle Ages in my research. I had been taught that they were the Dark Ages and that nothing of interest happened in them. My school-indoctrinated mind thought of these times as royals, as peasants, the plague, Templars, the Inquisition going after witches, pirates and sailors discovering new land, etc. There didn't seem to be much data on what happened between the year 800 and 1500. Once I let go of my preconceptions and beliefs about these times, a whole new world opened up. I learned that this time period was so much stranger than we were led to believe.